Hey everyone, and welcome back to 10 Minute Elections. Today is Monday, January 11th, 2021, as I am back after about a week of absence. I know my last video was the day before the Georgia runoffs, where I talked pretty in depth about that for the second time. And I made a video actually the day the runoffs were called for Warnock and Ossoff. I had a video ready to go, but then the Capitol was stormed in an unprecedented act of domestic terrorism. The president may be impeached. We had some pretty heavy objections to the electors that were actually somewhat subdued after the storming of the Capitol. A whole lot of stuff going on, and so I kept trying to make videos, but something new would happen. So I just said, screw it, I'm going to wait until, a week from now, and this all, the temperature in Washington cools a little bit. I think it's safe to say it has a little bit, although Donald Trump may be impeached today, so maybe I shouldn't speak too fast. I don't know. I may need to start doing daily videos because so much is happening in Washington right now. But I do want to devote a video to just how Democrats pulled it off in Georgia, among other stuff. Talk about congressional makeup heading into the early days of the 117th Congress and the Biden administration, stuff like that. So let's look at the Georgia results. Here's Jon Ossoff's map on the left. Here's Raphael Warnock's map on the right. And first thing I want to note, I know they look pretty similar, but you actually had this really interesting phenomenon of some voters who split their tickets Perdue-Warnock. That was much more common, by the way, much more common than Ossoff and Loeffler. And it's really a mystery who exactly these voters are, although from what I've read, they seem to lean more conservative. A lot of their concerns were maintaining divided government. They didn't want democratic unchecked power, which is understandable considering that they're conservative. And a lot of them just felt like Loeffler was too crazy. The Loeffler was too conservative, which, again, Kelly Loeffler is hated in the state of Georgia, not like David Perdue, and she will be out of the Senate soon. So Jon Ossoff won his election over David Perdue with 50.6% of the vote to David Perdue's 49.4. Raphael Warnock won with 51.0% to Kelly Loeffler's 49.0%. And the goals I talked about in my last Georgia video, what to look for in an Ossoff Warnock win, what to look for in a Perdue Loeffler win, about what margins they needed to hit in what counties and whatnot. Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock hit nearly all, if not, I believe they may have actually hit every objective. It was an excellent turnout. I think they saw over 90% black turnout from what we saw in the general election, as in over 90% of those black voters that voted in Georgia in the general election voted again. And those voters broke something like 90-10 for Ossoff and especially for Warnock as well. They were able to run up margins in Fulton County. Of course, they won DeKalb County easily as well, ran up margins there, won Cobb County by a sizable margin, did well in Savannah as well as the southeastern part of the state, those rural, slightly blue counties. So really everything, the Democratic Party kind of needed a perfect storm to win these things, and they did. They got that. They got great turnout from Democrats. They got Trump really kind of sabotaging Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue in the couple of days before the election, obviously with that phone call to Brad Raffensperger a couple of days before that got leaked. David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, frankly, weren't the best candidates. And they kind of ran a campaign tying themselves as closely to Donald Trump as they could in a state Donald Trump lost. That's what I think their campaigns didn't really understand. This was a state that the president, soon to be former president, lost in November. And so you can't run a campaign basically advertising yourself as that candidate when they lost by tens of thousands of votes. And so Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff, seeing that, needed to bank on basically the higher turnout, the better Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock would do. And the turnout was extremely high, so they won. It's really that simple. Something like 4.5 million votes, which was huge turnout. A lot of analysts were suggesting 3 to 4 million votes would be cast. 4.5 million. So excellent turnout. Turnout is always a good thing, just from a democratic interest standpoint, not democratic as in the Democratic Party, just democratic as in, democracy. You want people out to vote, but the higher the turnout is, as a general rule, the better the Democratic Party does. And that's why you see a lot more kind of almost voter suppression in states like North Carolina, in states like Georgia, where the Republicans have control, and not necessarily looser, but a little more inclusive and a little easier voting laws in states like California. So here are the results. Now I want to talk about congressional makeup, basically what the government's going to look like. So the presidency is obviously Democratic. Joe Biden won the presidential election. Yes, he did. The Senate is going to be split 50-50 with going into these elections, there were 53 Republicans and 47 Democrats. Democrats lost a seat in Alabama, but then won a special election in Arizona, a regularly scheduled election in Colorado, a regularly scheduled runoff election in Georgia, and a runoff special election in Georgia for a net gain of 3 seats to take control of the chamber. In the House of Representatives, 219 Democrats, 210 Republicans will be serving, as far as we know it, for the duration of the next 2 years. 3 Democrats, all in safe Democratic districts, have been tapped by the Biden administration. That's, is it Cedric Richmond, Marcia Fudge, and Deb Haaland are the ones that have been tapped. 2 congressional districts are still undecided. Rita Hart in Iowa's 2nd Congressional District. The state certified her loss to Marionette Miller Meeks by just 6 votes. She has claimed that there were about 30 votes that were not counted that should have been, that would have swung it in her favor by 9 votes. And she has appealed her case not to the state courts, just directly to the House. So how that'll work, Nancy Pelosi said Marionette Miller Meeks has been provisionally seated. Basically, Marionette Miller Meeks, the Republican certified winner, will be the representative until the case is settled. In where there's an investigation and whatnot, in which the whole House, this is the law, the entire House will vote on who to seat, and it's a vote that could very well break on partisan lines. And then you have this one shaded in Republican box. That's Republican former Representative-elect Luke Letlow, who died to COVID-19 a couple weeks ago. I know that says last week. That's when I made this graphic. Unfortunately, he does reside from a safe red district, so we should see these 3 Democrats that have been tapped replaced by Democrats, and Luke Letlow replaced by a Republican whenever those special elections happen. And then 210 Republicans that, no strings attached, such that we know of. Also, going back to the Senate, so it's a 50-50 Senate. Chuck Schumer will be the majority leader, but kind of with an asterisk, the last time we saw a split Senate was after the 2000 Senate elections, which saw it draw to a 50-50 tie in a power-sharing agreement between Tom Daschle and Trent Lott, held for roughly 4 months until Democrats took control of the chamber, with Jim Jeffords, the Republican from Vermont, switching parties. So Kamala Harris will serve as the tie-breaking vote. Democrats should take the majority leader position, which is huge because it decides what legislation comes to the floor, and so a lot of Biden's appellate court nominees should go through much more smoothly now. And Democrats should chair committees. Amy Klobuchar should chair the Rules Committee. Bernie Sanders will chair not the Butter Committee, the Budget Committee, etc., etc. So with Kamala Harris breaking Senate ties, Democrats have won a Senate majority in government trifecta, although any legislation without GOP support, meaning it's a party line vote, will need Joe Manchin's vote, Democrat from West Virginia. He is the most conservative Democrat in the Senate and most centrist member of Congress in terms of voting record. 3 Democratic representatives have been tapped by Biden. I already said that. Iowa's 2nd and New York's 22nd. New York's 22nd, there is no result yet. Like, the race actually has not been called. And it seems like with a new court case, it swings every day between Anthony Brindisi, the Democratic incumbent, and Claudia Tenney, the former Republican incumbent. So that's pretty much, it's going to be a very narrow majority in both the House and the Senate for the Democratic Party, which means that budget reconciliation is now absolutely on the table, which means we will probably see $2,000 stimulus checks very soon after January 20th, when Joe Biden is inaugurated. We should probably see the Biden tax plan has a much more high likelihood of going through, although again, they're probably going to need to add some things into that to get a vote from Manchin and possibly a vote from Sinema, although Sinema is more likely than Manchin on a party line vote. Climate change funding, we could see that. That's honestly gray area because the budget reconciliation process, which requires only 51 Senate votes instead of the typical 60, that has to relate to government spending and kind of the national debt. So it's unclear and would probably go to court if they tried to throw climate change into that. All right, so Donald Trump will probably be impeached today. The House gavels in at 11 Eastern Time, which, as I'm recording this video, is about 30 minutes from now. So, I'm just going to read through the article of impeachment here. It is incitement of insurrection. There's only one article. The Constitution provides the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment. President shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of blah, 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 blah. Let's see. Okay, so Donald John Trump engaged in high crimes and misdemeanors by willfully inciting violence against the government of the United States. In that, on January 6th, pursuant to the 12th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, the VP of the United States House and Senate meet at the U.S. Capitol for a joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. Shortly before the joint session commenced, President Trump addressed a crowd of his political supporters nearby. There, he reiterated false claims that he won this election and we won it by a landslide. He also willfully made statements that encouraged and foreseeably resulted in imminent lawlessness action at the Capitol. Incited by Trump, a mob unlawfully breached the Capitol, injured law enforcement personnel, menaced members of Congress and the Vice President, interfered with the joint session's solemn constitutional duty to certify the election results, and engaged in violent, deadly, destructive, and seditious acts. So President Trump's conduct on January 6th was consistent with his prior efforts to subvert and obstruct the certification of results in the 2020 election. Those results include, and they're not limited to, a phone call on January 2nd in which Donald Trump urged Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to find enough votes to overturn the Georgia election results and threaten Mr. Raffensperger if he failed to do so. Yep, fined 11,780 votes, and he did tell Brad Raffensperger that he could go to jail, basically. So on all this, Trump gravely endangered the security of the U.S. and the institutions of government, threatened the integrity of the democratic system, interfered with a peaceful transition of power, and impaired a coordinate branch of government. He thereby betrayed his trust as president to the manifest injury of the people of the U.S., wherefore President Trump, by such conduct, has demonstrated that he will remain a threat to national security, democracy, and constitution if allowed to remain in office, and has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-government and rule of law. President Trump thus warrants impeachment, a trial, removal from office, and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the U.S. So there you go. That is the article of impeachment. He'll probably be impeached today. And a couple of notes. Firstly, that Democratic Representative Ted Lieu, which is one of the authors, along with Jamie Raskin, has said that he strongly believes that there will be Republican votes to impeach. Also, according to a memo sent out by Republican leader Mitch McConnell a few days ago in the Senate, a Senate trial would, unless there's unanimous consent to bring the Senate back from recess, which will almost certainly not happen since, Ted Cruz is in the Senate, an impeachment trial will begin at the earliest on January 20th at 1 p.m., which is 1 hour after Joe Biden will have been inaugurated, meaning it is virtually impossible that an impeachment trial, again, unless there's unanimous consent from the Senate, which is highly unlikely, an impeachment trial would happen after Biden has already been inaugurated, which in that case, it would probably be taking away from, valuable time that Biden would have with the Democratic House and Senate. So Democratic House Democrat Jim Clyburn, who is the number 3 Democrat in the House, has said that he wants to maybe wait until after the first 100 days when Biden's in office. So he's kind of gotten the major legislation, the cabinet piece is done. Then that legislation gets sent up to the Senate. And they have the impeachment trial when business has slowed down a little bit. Budget reconciliation may have already happened. One more thing I want to talk about, Murkowski, Toomey, and Sasse, 3 Republican senators. So this is Lisa Murkowski, Republican from Alaska, up in 2022. I want him to resign. I want him out. He has caused enough damage. He's either been golfing or he's been inside the Oval Office fuming and throwing every single person under the bus who has been loyal and faithful to him. Starting with the vice president. He doesn't want to stay there. He only wants to stay there for the title. He only wants to stay there for his ego. He needs to get out. He needs to do the good thing, but I don't think he's capable of doing a good thing. In the long term, Murkowski is suggesting that she might leave the Republican Party. If the Republican Party has become nothing more than the party of Trump, I sincerely question whether this is the party for me. It could prove even more significant than her support for Mr. Trump's removal. This is from New York Times, by the way. With the victories of John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock and Georgia's Senate runoffs, Democrats will have the slimmest possible majority. Democrats' 50-vote total includes 2 independents, Bernie Sanders of Vermont and Angus King of Maine, who caucused with them. Ms. Murkowski did not say whether she would caucus with the Democrats if she left the GOP, but even a decision to become an independent non-caucusing, which it's virtually impossible to get anything done in the Senate if you're not caucusing. People have tried for short amounts of time, then realized that it doesn't bear much fruit. That would significantly change the political dynamics in the chamber, which it will, because it would give the Democratic Party an outright majority, or at least a plurality, which it does not have at this point. It only has kind of that asterisk because of Kamala Harris being the tiebreaker vote, which will give Democrats the edge on party line votes. Pat Toomey has also expressed his support for impeachment and Trump's resignation, and Ben Sasse has said that he would heavily consider them and has sort of kind of called for the president's removal. So 3 Republican senators. Interestingly, Susan Collins has not joined this group. We'll see how we'll see kind of what Susan Collins does in the coming days. Also, Mitt Romney directly said that Trump incited what happened at the Capitol. I would not be surprised at all if Senators Romney, Murkowski, Toomey, Sasse, and Collins were all to convict in an impeachment trial, especially, actually, the first 4, Romney, Murkowski, Toomey, and Sasse, which would mean 55 convictions if all 5 of those Republican senators convicted. 67 would be necessary to remove the president. So after those 5, assuming Collins convicts, which actually is not as surefire as the other 4, then they would need 12 more Republican senators to convict, and we're not really sure where those would be found, because I don't think Republican leadership would, well, at least because a bunch of those members would be convicting. I don't know how Mitch McConnell or John Thune would treat this. John Thune basically does whatever Mitch McConnell does, or just kind of echoes him. So I'm not really sure where those next 12 votes would come from. But if the president does something even more egregious in the next week, which, frankly, given his track record, we can't count out, we could see that support for conviction come to fruition. And it's unclear whether John Roberts would still preside over an impeachment trial, but it would, if Donald Trump was convicted, he would lose his pension, his travel allowance that a post-president receives, and his lifetime Secret Service detail. And after he's convicted, a simple majority vote could bar him from ever holding public office again, which, if he's convicted, that almost certainly follows, because 67 are necessary for conviction, 51 are necessary for banning from public office. Okay, so I will probably need to make a new video later today, because Donald Trump, who knows what will have happened by then. But here's what has happened in the past week, a period of, I guess, relative calm on Capitol Hill, if not for a few hours. So y'all will be getting this video, I think, right about when I'm recording it, and I look forward to seeing y'all in the next video, whenever that may be, because frankly, with the uncertainty on Capitol Hill, we have no idea.